Welcome to the Beyond the Diagnosis podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kylie Burton. If you have been told that your blood work is normal, yet you feel awful, well, this is the place for you, because whether you have a diagnosis or not, I'm going to teach you how to turn those normal labs into real answers, healing, and hope. So grab your blood work. Come join me. Here we go.
Okay, so why is it so important beyond just the human, the gut, the food, the nutrients, potential inflammatory issues or potential pathogens? It's way beyond that. And what that means is this is a bidirectional problem or a bidirectional benefit. The transit time is certainly related to how well your stomach, your small intestine, and your colon is behaving. All the nerves that are sensing, how well your vagal nerve is behaving, by the way. And again, that's a whole nother talk, but remember, our vagal nerve innervates everything down here. And when it's not functioning properly, it can challenge the motor migrating complex and slow things down. So now we're really digging deep, but I'm just going to tell Mike, we'll circle back to this for a different seminar, okay? Because the vagal nerve it's its own story, but it's part of this journey. And that bidirectional communication, like any brilliant relationship or any relationship worth having, you want to know what are all the people or what are all the components of this relationship. We have our intestinal tract. We have all these amazing nerve cells and communication cells, but we have another thing called the microbiota. And the microbiota dictates in many cases what our transition time and what our stool types become. So on the one hand, there's control on our body side, but there's control on the microbial side. I mentioned diarrhea. So when you have a very dysbiotic GI microbiota, whether it be colonic as well as small intestinal, a dysbiosis of microbes will immediately trigger a diarrhea event. And that will continue until we start to recapitulate a lot of the diversity we need in both the small and large, especially in the large intestine. So there's one example of when our microbiota is out of whack, our stool is out of whack. And then one of the most logical transitions that I can give you, because we'll get into the transit time more in a second, is when you think of diarrhea, for the most part, that means your transit time is going to be short. When you think of impacted, really hard, painful stool, that means extended transit times well beyond 3, 4, 5 days. And I've even met people who haven't used or haven't had a bowel movement in 2 weeks. Now, can you imagine what's going on with someone that hasn't had a bowel movement in 2 weeks? In fact, let me take that one step further. There are cases, nothing I'm experienced with, but there are cases where the entire system backs up all the way into the stomach with food, so that when they start having these reflux, reverse peristalsis, they are literally throwing up feces because it's been backed up for so many days. They're actually regurgitating what would otherwise be considered stool. These are that's an extreme, mind you, but it happens. It happens in our country all the time. So it's certainly an issue that we want to tackle at a much earlier level. So to refocus on the microbiota, let me just say, to put a fine point on it, a healthy, diverse microbiota creates a healthy and predictable transit time. Now, that is a window. It's not a specific time. You don't get to set your watch or your alarm clock to your bowel movements, although some people do. It means that, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 hours in the gastric. We're looking at 2 to 4 hours in the small bowel. And 4 might be a little short, but that's depending on the type of food you've eaten. And that's true for all of these windows of time. The colonic transit, anywhere from 10 to 30 hours. And I want to point out that women have a slightly longer colon than men do, because the colon for women had to be slightly long to allow for the uterus to expand during pregnancy. So it's really likely that most of your female patients will have a slightly longer transit time than your male patients. And that's really a consequence of the longer colon. So the whole gut transit time, 18 to 38 hours. These time points, by the way, these are my time points. If you go on to an MD or a university website and look at transit times, they're going to be so much broader than this. I've seen anywhere from 9 to 80 hours, 90 hours of transit time, which falls within a realm of them being okay with that. That is an unnecessarily large window. And I'm sure Kylie and Mike could speak to the idea that that's equally unnecessary in blood labs. If you open that window so wide, everybody fits in that window, and you're really not doing anybody any services, because you're just saying, oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I know it took you 3 days to go to the bathroom, but you're fine. Yeah, go home, drink a glass of water. It's an unacceptable proposition, and I'm pointing that out. So these times are more along the line of what I've experienced with healthier microbiomes taking the Blu Poo pill. And we could even dial this in with more challenges and more data. On the short end of this window, we are compromising the transit time and the absorption and creation of nutrients. Now, remember, I want to point out that the stomach does the first task of creating the ability for our food to be absorbed and all the nutrients to be unlocked so that they can be absorbed by the small intestine. In the small intestine is the vast majority of the main nutrient absorptions that our cells are looking for: vitamins, the minerals, the carbs, the fats, and the protein. In the colon is where we absorb all the amazing, unique nutrients. And it's those combination of 3 steps. We don't want the transit time to be too long, because if it is, then we start to pull water back into the intestines and the colon. We also start pulling toxins back out of metabolic products back out of the intestines. So remember, we dump our waste into our GI tract to get rid of it, right? We're creating feces, so we're dumping waste. The longer it goes through the small intestine, the large intestine, the more opportunity for toxin reabsorption, hormone reabsorption. The longer we can even have our nutrients depleted by overactive microbes. We can start growing microbes where they don't belong because it's sitting there too long. It's no different than you leaving a glass of milk or juice out on the counter. If it sits there too long, it's going to start growing microbes. And that's not what we want. We want the food to go through and remain clean and feed where it needs to feed and get out the bottom. But that's too long of a transit time. Too short, we don't have time to break our food apart. We don't have time to ferment the food in the colon. These things are happening too rapidly. And by the time we have a bowel movement, which is likely diarrhea or somewhere in the neighborhood of the stool 3, 4, or 5, 6, and 7, we've not gotten the nutrient or the feeding of the microbiota. And we're now going to be, over time, become deficient. The microbes are going to be deficient, and the human is going to be deficient of its absorption and its fermented byproducts, these metabolites that we all need. So on the long end, we worry about toxins and reintroducing toxins, reintroducing hormones. We worry about overgrowth. Too many organisms start growing in our colon and our small intestine. On the too short of an end, we worry about undergrowth of microorganisms. We're not feeding our microbiota properly, and we're also not feeding our cells because things are moving through the system too fast. There's a too long and a too short. We want to be in that window. And how do we do that? We modified our diet. We modify our prebiotic content, our probiotic content. And whenever we're doing a detox or we're going through a hormonal challenge, we be mindful of the transient time, because it's telling us what our microbes are doing, and it's telling what our nutrient and our GI is doing. So it's really a mindful process that's going to give you all those indicators. It's going to tell you how healthy your microbiome is. It's going to tell you how healthy your stomach, small intestine, and large intestine is behaving. It's going to give you an indication of how much nutrient or not nutrient you're absorbing. It's going to tell you how many toxins you're reabsorbing or hormones you're reabsorbing. So I'm trying to paint the picture of here is, just by paying attention to the transit time in the stool, you've now learned about toxins and how well toxins are being processed in our body, whether they're being taken up or taken out. You're learning about how healthy our microbes are. You're learning about how much nutrient absorption you're getting and how many nutrients you're creating from your food, because of the transit time. You're figuring out how much electrolyte and water is being absorbed and released throughout the process, because if you're too diarrhea, there's a key. You're also learning about inflammation and potential pathogens, because if you go from a normal stool to a really loose stool, there's a reason, there's a cause. And that cause is going to be something inflammatory, something toxic, something pathogenic. Right out of the gate, those three things have to be dealt with, or at least those questions have to be asked. And if you're too hard, you know that we've got the slow migration, too many microbes in the system. You could be being backed up by your own microbiota. And not to go back on anything I've ever promised you guys, I love microbes. I love our microbiome. But if we don't be aware of its power, it can work against us. This is a case of that. When you overgrow your microbiome by feeding it the wrong foods, and it creates this long transit times, everything's getting harder and backed up and all this, you're allowing even good microbes to grow out of control. And that's a problem. It's like leaving all your food on the counter. Bad idea. Let's not do it. Let's get the food moving through there. When you think about this as a human system and how much impact these microbes have, these microbes can slow down our migration. They can speed it up. They can cause toxins to be moved back in. They can cause us to not absorb enough nutrients in the process. When you put all this together, we have a situation where the microbes and the body are not in balance, and we need to balance our microbes to our body. And one of the ways we do that, of course, is we start with a Blu Poo pill. We say, okay, let's see what's happening with your gut. And 90% of the time, the people come back and say, wow, I go to the bathroom every day, but it took me 3 days to see blue poop in the toilet. Or it took me 4 days. And on the other end of the spectrum, and this happened in my own family, like, would you guys all please take this? Oh yeah, I poop regularly. I mean, I their relationship with their poop is pretty uneventful. They don't really think about it much. But when you start talking about it, they come back to me and say, well, the toilet turned blue after 9 hours. And I said, this is incredible. Are you sure? Let's do this again. This can't be real. 9 hours after you ate a meal and took the Blu Poo pill, that's incredible. So we did it again. Yes, 9 hours. Of course, now I'm saying, okay, you are nutrient deficient. Your microbes are deficient in diversity. We're going to sit down and go through your diet. What are your dietary choices? Because you're clearly not eating the right foods nor taking the right products. And I have these products in my cupboards. They're right there. You just grab them and use them. They're not even, I'm not even asking them to spend $3,000. They're right there. We are going to fix this problem. And we did. We start breaking it down briefly, and start doing the Blu Poop challenge a week later, and a week after that, and a week after that, and start seeing these changes in the diet, the poop consistency, as well as the transit times. And they naturally start feeling better. They start paying attention to the feelings they do have in the gut. This brings about the idea that we have a gut instinct. There's a reason why every culture around every continent for millennia have used these terms of gut instinct. There's the gut feeling. These are not terms that were created randomly. These are terms that were created because we really do have the sensory going on down there. And there are some really people that become interoceptively study, where they study meditation. They study listening to their heart rate, listening to their bowel, the gurgling and the nervous system, and they really focus inward. They actually can feel what's going on in their gut, and it becomes actually a problem. We won't get into that, but they actually can feel and sense the food moving through the GI tract if you spend enough time meditating and really getting into that. And that's a different world. A lot of that you see in the Asian, some of the Asian really deep meditation. It's brilliant, but it also is dangerous because then it starts to mess with your mind. But it's that feeling. We have a connection to our gut. You meet somebody and you say, man, that Shayne guy, he gave me a gut heebie-jeebies. Well, That's a real thing. We can't ignore it, and we have to prove otherwise. We have to really go through the process of why would our gut tell us something and have it be in conflict with our brain. It's a meaningful bidirectional deal, and a lot of that has to do with how healthy your gut is and what kind of sensories they're getting. One of the ways in which we bond as people is let's sit down and have a meal together. When we share our food, when we share the experience, our gut gets the same message. Our brain then gets the same message, and we say, fantastic, having this meal together means that we can now talk in more detail or do more things as, partners, business, whatever. So there's this really intuitive piece that our gut is meaningful to people, and we can tap into that. And it's one of the ways I talk to clients and even doctors to say, ask them about their diet, ask them about how do they have meals with the family, or are they just always eating in the car? Are they always eating on the go? Are they sitting down? Are they having good cooked meals with people they love, people that are in their lives? And you'll really transform the way the vagal nerve interacts between the gut and the brain. And that in itself can start transitioning transit time, microbiome relationships, as well as the stool output, right? And the nutrient uptakes. It can be as simple as we're designed to transform the way we behave, both microbial, physiologically, and biologically and emotionally. So if you see clients that their guts are wrecked or they have transit times that are out of whack, start with understanding their diet, do the Blu Poo pill, and then start implementing your tools, which can be probiotics, prebiotics, can be nutrients. If they've got loose stool, they're going to be really short on all of the nutrients that Kylie and Mike have in their systems. All of the vitamins, all the minerals, all of the phytochemicals, those are all going to be in short supply in the bloodstream. They're just not going to be there. And then coach them on their meal. Sit down with people, enjoy a meal at least once a day with the people in your lives, because it will start sending the message from the gut to the brain to the gut, that this is an important process. We can't treat it like a fast food service. It's got to be treated with respect, and it will pay you back in spades. There's all these little nuances that we won't have time to get into today. And if any one of these you guys want to get into later, we absolutely will make time. But look at this. We've noticed, they're starting to send capsules down people's GI tracts that are little tiny computers. I don't know if you guys knew this, but they're making microcomputers. Now, not to be confused with conspiracy theories, right? These are designed by scientists. They look like the size of a capsule, and they collect information, and then you poop them out, and then you download the information. Very amazing stuff. I actually follow a company that's doing this because they're learning a little bit more about our GI system, and we just have never done this. So you can see on the left-hand side of this slide how the pH changes all the way down. So these little chambers that we have really can modify the pH, because that helps us modify our types of microbes that grow in that pH. Microbes are very sensitive pH. It helps us modify what kinds of nutrients we're extracting. It helps us modify the enzymes and how they work, the phytomedicines that we take. This impacts us very dramatically throughout this entire process. So it's important that we maintain pHs, and you guys all know that, but now we know that we've actually tracked the pH all the way through. In that process, from the stomach to small intestine to colon, there's these transit times on that middle column here. And again, there's wide ranges. Now, the wide ranges I'm not happy with, but you got to keep in mind, these groups are studying just a population of people in either America or Europe, and their guts are going to be in any level of health to dysbiosis, right? They're not excluding people from their studies, so they're going to capture all kinds of populations, and this variety is going to be big. So you can see it goes from 0.6 hours, 2 to 6 hours in fed versus 0 to 2 hours in fasted. Now, just a little nugget, think about this. If you're in a fasted state and you want to get something into their body, some compound, whether it be a phytonutrient or even a different kind of nutrient, notice in the fasted state, it goes through the stomach much more rapidly. So when we're telling people, hey, take this on an empty stomach, take this in a fasted state, what we're really saying is we want it to go through the stomach quickly, so that we can get it into the small and large intestines to get it absorbed more rapidly. So you can see those times. In the small intestine, we got 2 to 8 hours. In the proximal, distal, we have, so again, the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. I botched that earlier, by the way. We have 0.1 to 46. Look at that range. 0.3 to 80 in the distal. And the rectal sigmoid, look at that, 1 to 134 hours. Unless you were a brown bear, a grizzly, and you had just eaten your last meal and we're going into hibernation, this 134 hours just kills me. Now, animals, there's a lot of really fun, I'm tangent for a second, but animals have a much different process here, because many animals do go into hibernation, or they do go through long periods of fast and feast. There's reasons for that, and there's reasons to change the way their intestines work. We, on the other hand, don't have that same problem. But in a fasted state, which I have not done much of, so in your challenge, you guys, if you ever have anybody in your Blu Poo challenges, which I'm highly encouraging because I keep saying it over and over again, the importance of maybe finding unique people. Let's say someone's in a fasted state, and they have been for, let's say they're doing the 1-2-5 or the 5-2-1 or any variation of that, and you take the Blu Poo pill both in a fast state and a non-fasted state. What does it do? I don't think we have good data for that. You guys could actually be creating information that isn't currently known very well on transit times and the type of stool. So these are all really exciting possibilities. And let's say, based on that, if your stool is too loose or too hard, I suspect, at least in my notes, Mike, that one of the things I do with people that are in a constipated state is I absolutely introduce a fasted moment, right? A moment where we need to get those bowels moving. So we still need medicinal compounds like what's in the clears to help peristalsis, but we don't want to keep adding food into the process because it's not moving through there. So there is a fasting component to that particular protocol when you're in a constipated state. We want to get things through there.
When you do that fast, however long you recommend that for, you could take the clear 1 and clear 2 for example, during the fast.
That's right. And we just have to manage it so it doesn't upset them. So maybe we start with a low dose and then, beef it up over the next 24 to 48 hours if their body's handling it well. And oftentimes they do, because they're ready for these compounds to say, let's get the game moving. We are miserable being stuck like this. And a lot of water, tons of water in those states, right? And then the opposite is true on the other side. We still might use the clears for a diarrhea scenario, but we need to start adding back certain prebiotics to alter the microbes, to then alter the ability for us to slow down this process and get rid of pathogens. The clears are there because I always suspect some level of pathogenicity in either state, because we're either overgrowing or we're underrepresenting good bugs in those two extremes. So we need to address that right out of the gate. It's always the case. So you can see on the top, we have colonic transit time going up, fecal water content going down. It's a balance. We got to find that balance in the middle. We don't want too much colonic transit time or too little moisture. And what's happening during the microbial metabolism is we get complex carbs on the left-hand side of this that, by the way, do affect the pH, which keeps everything healthy. So we have to have these complex carbs. When people stay on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet too long, this first part over here on the left, we're completely abandoning this phenomenon microbially. So over time, people that stay in ketosis or stay in a carnivore diet, they're losing all these microbes if they stay there too long. They're losing microbes that are beneficial to their GI. It may take months, it may even take longer for them to start experiencing symptoms as related to being on a specific diet too long. Again, another topic that I promise we will get into, and that's diet variation of the diets that we've studied. But on that left-hand side, you can see that the saccharolysis is an important component. So having complex carbs in our gut is an important part of our microbiota and our health. And those only come from plant-based materials. That's it. They don't come from meat, and they don't come from fat, and they don't come from that type of diet. Temporarily, those diets can be amazing for a short period of time. We got the bile acids. Now, bile acids are an important part because they're not only metabolized by our bacteria in our gut, but they also help us absorb all these important lipid-philic molecules. So your vitamin A, your D, your Ks, your E's, and so on. And a lot of plant-based, the curcumin, the resveratrol, these are things that are all absorbed by fat-loving things. So we need that to happen. We need the bile to be triggered by the diet and the bugs. And then we want to absorb the nutrients, but get rid of the waste. So you can see that's the next step. If we have too much transit time, that bile gets chewed up by the bugs and all those toxins are released back into the bloodstream. I've mentioned that a number of times now. You can see. Now, if we have dietary fats that sit around too long, you guys have heard of trimethylamine. That's an oxidative. That's a bad guy. We don't want dietary fats to sit in our small intestine very long, because if we make too much trimethylamine, we're going to be absorbing what's essentially an oxidative compound. It's dangerous for DNA and so on. So these are just specific toxins that I mentioned in more of a global perspective earlier. You can see that we have methanogens. You guys, when you have SIBO, what are the gases we try to test coming out of the mouth? We test hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. That tells us we have SIBO. Well, that also affects SIBO. People have altered transit times. So if you don't have a gas measuring tool with an altered transit time, you can at least put that on your list as a potential possibility, and that's SIBO. But then we have proteolysis. Now, proteolysis for the food we eat is fantastic. It creates all these amino acids that we absolutely need. We need amino acids, end of story. Where they come from plants, where they come from legumes, where they come from animal protein, we need amino acids. That's clear. So that's happening. Again, in the microbial metabolism, they make a lot of amino acids that our body needs. However, if our body if we don't get enough amino acid input, or our microbes can't produce them from what we are eating, which is a lot of the complex foods, then what happens is our microbes start eating our mucus lining. If they don't get enough of the good foods, your mucus lining becomes part of supper, and they start degrading your mucus lining, which then creates all kinds of inflammatory, leaky gut, and so on. So it's these really, you guys all know these from you guys have all heard about leaky gut. Well, that's because something in their gut was destroying the mucus, which then opened up the tight junctions and so on and so forth. These are all connected. Transit time is a window into that. So is stool consistency. Without even having to scope them to see that their mucus is gone, you want a healthy, when you run a detox program and, someone says, well, it hurts coming out, it's really dry, I feel like I don't have any mucus in my mouth, I don't have enough. When I swallow, it hurts because I'm not producing enough mucus. That's a sign. That's a sign that they are not, either that too many microbes are eating it, or they're not getting enough carbohydrate, complex carbs for the body to generate mucus. These are all little tiny things that we need to be aware of. And then the microbial composition at the bottom, you can see diversity goes up as transit time goes up. We don't want too much overgrowth. That's what I mentioned when you start getting hard, terrible poops. That's too much overgrowth, even of the good guys. We need to bring it down into the middle where diversity is great, growth is not overgrowing, and then we don't have too many of these organisms that destroy our mucous membranes, start eating our intestines, and so on, because they will live on us. If we don't feed them, they will start eating us. Not to be morbid, but when we pass and we don't produce all these things for our bugs because we have passed, they will eat us. They will start eating us. That's what they do. They love us, but they don't necessarily love us that much, I guess. They're out to survive as well. Okay, so I know it's a lot. Blu Poo pill is a tool. I want you to play with it. I'm sure, and this is all going to be done through Mike and Kylie. We can coordinate, get you some protocols, however they want to do this. But it becomes not only a fun tool, because you are turning your poo blue and you're creating conversations you've never had, but what I wanted to emphasize today is that it's a tool that tells you so much more than you ever thought could be possible to move each and one of your clinics into a positive direction. There's so much information there. You can go months. You can keep people testing out for months and months and months. Month 1, they're all at 18 hours. Month 2, they're 24 hours. Month 3, a couple of them jumped up to 72 hours. Wait a second, what happened? I mean, there's so many things you can do with these Blu Poo pills, and it's going to be not only exciting, but very clinically relevant.
Hey, if you're new here, welcome aboard. If you're coming back, welcome back. I'm coming back as well. In fact, we're going to have new episodes every Wednesday right here on the Beyond the Diagnosis podcast. If you love what you just listened to and love what you've been listening to, I would be honored to have you leave a review. Leave it on the place where you listen to your podcast, so that way more people can find this podcast and get answers from their blood work as well. I'm Dr. Kylie, and I'll see you next week.